70% plus of roles are never advertised. The average amount of time a CV spent is 3.9 seconds. It means that there's a bunch of CVs that are getting like 0.1, 0.2 of a second on them. Cover letters are read for fewer than 9 seconds. No one is going to read the whole thing. Eye tracking software would suggest the top left is going to have a real strong heat signature, and that will signify where most of the reader's time is being spent. And as you move diagonally away, there's very low probability that anyone is reading it. In ChatGPT, you can also have it assist in the job hunting process.
Reaching out directly to employers.
I am a big fan of sliding into their DMs, but in a very specific way. If the top thing in that job description is attention to detail, literally start a paragraph with attention to detail. If you're on LinkedIn and you see this job has already received 3,000 applications, you think, why should I even bother? But actually, you do just 2 basic principles, you're already in the top 5%. As a recruiter, you're really looking for reasons to not give someone an interview. And I know that sounds brutal, but it's the truth.
Welcome back to Evolve. Today we have Raj, who is a careers consultant at the University of Cambridge, and he'll be telling us the top tips to securing a job in 2025. Raj, welcome. We're really grateful for your time today. Could you please introduce yourself?
I'm Raj. I'm a careers consultant at the University of Cambridge. Been a careers consultant for 10 years across that university and UCL. And prior to that, I worked in investment banking for 10 years on 3 different trading floors in the City of London.
What would be your main tips and advice for someone trying to get a job in 2025?
Yeah, so I think firstly to say 2025 is a tough market, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but let's get the mechanics in place first of all. Where do you look? I know we've got an international audience out there. I'm going to go with Google. Fantastic web scraper. You can put in quotations exactly the role you want, and you can say that type of job near me. So software developer, all in inverted commas. The pros are it's massively broad in its scope and what it will return. The cons are it can be quite tight in terms of what it returns. So it's going to take software developers really, really literally, and anything outside of scope might fall away. Which is why my second, and in reverse numerical order, so my favorite is probably LinkedIn. Now, I know people have funky relationships with LinkedIn. The word has connotations. I'm not talking about the social media element and the feed. As a job search tool, it is amazing for a few different reasons. Number one, it's the cheapest way for organizations to post a role, which means you get an enormous amount of diversity that you just wouldn't get anywhere else. It's massively international. And I did an experiment over the last 3 summers, actually. I'm a careers nerd. So I've been comparing the jobs that are posted on Amazon's website on their own jobs page versus what they're putting out on LinkedIn. There's a ton of stuff they're putting on LinkedIn that they're not putting on their own website. And so I think increasingly there's been a trend that you see stuff on LinkedIn that you simply won't see anywhere else. I think a lot of organizations are almost outsourcing their job search function to LinkedIn. So in terms of diversity, in terms of interesting stuff, definitely set up your alerts on LinkedIn. And I think between LinkedIn and Google, it's got a huge coverage. So that's the kind of mechanical nuts and bolts out of the way. I'd say in 2025, also a massive tip is going to be quality of applications over quantity. And I think this is really, really crucial. And it comes up with a lot of conversations I have. You really want to be spending at least 6 hours per application. And again, I know that's a number that's going to freak a lot of people out. It would have freaked me out back in the day. But in the age of AI, in the age of accelerating the process of making an application, you kind of want to zig when everyone else is zagging. You want to go the opposite way and really lean into quality, because that is the key differentiator. Specifically, I mean, looking exactly into the organization, how that has a parallel with you. And if you're using AI, there are ways of really making the quality stick out as well. I also want to say quality over quantity, because unless you really lean into the quality of your applications, you're getting no feedback from the labor market. So the rejections or the interview invites you get, you don't know what it's based on. You really want to be putting your absolute best foot forward in order to understand if you're taking the right step as well. And the more effort you put in your application stage, the less effort you got to put in your interview, because you're doing a lot of the pre-work. So whilst numbers can be hugely seductive, quantity can be very seductive. I had a conversation last week also with someone who's making 30 applications a day. And after a bit of querying, like a lot of them were LinkedIn easy applies and has a very tempting blue button in the bottom right of your corner, but please don't use it. It's so tempting to feel like that's a legitimate application. And it is kind of ending up as an application, but it's not the way in 2025 to compete. Like the top 20% of applicants are going to be leaning into quality. If you're not leaning into quality too, you are just being outcompeted, generally speaking. So that's the second thing I'd say. The third thing is a job hunting plan is not necessarily a strategy. And I think a lot of times I speak to people who get these two things mixed up. A job hunting plan might be, I want to work in TV production as a runner, and therefore I'm just going to apply to things that I see advertised. And so they're looking for job adverts for TV runners, and there's not a lot of them. Not because there aren't TV runner jobs, just because those jobs aren't generally advertised. If you consider the most conservative estimate is that 70% plus of roles are never advertised. I think in TV production, it's going to be way north of 95%. So if your job hunting strategy is just to apply to roles you see in TV production, you're kind of leaving a lot of value on the table. You're only interacting with a tiny portion of the labour market. The thing to say here is to really reflect on where the roles you're after exist. Are they in those advertised positions? Are they through networking and people? Are they through recruitment consultants? There are generally three ways of getting a role anyway. And just be conscious of the percentage between those three and how you're switching between them. And with a job hunting approach, I think having those three things is really useful to have in your mind because you can tailor as you go. If you feel like you're getting more success through written applications or through networking, well, that's the kind of thing you need to lean more into. So being conscious about the feedback you're getting from the labour market. The other thing I'd say about this is mental well-being and wellness. Job hunting is emotional. I think it's very difficult to do this in a detached way. We're out there putting our value out for people to judge us in respect of a role. You'd have to be a robot of some description to not feel the effects of that. So job hunting in 2025 is tough. The markets are tough. You can go on websites like levels.fyi and track in real time the amount of redundancies that are happening in different industries. And that's sobering to see those numbers stack up. So take it easy on yourself. Define success in a way that works for you. And what I mean by that is don't get too absorbed in the feedback you're getting from the labour market. If that's zero, if you're getting ghosted, put your focus into the effort that you are putting into each application. Put those 6 hours in per application. Know that you are doing a good job and have the satisfaction that comes from that. The outcomes are going to be the outcomes. It's really, really important to define success in a way that works for you, especially as labour markets are quite challenging at the moment. And the last thing I'd say to this is to learn the right lessons. If you're not getting interview invites, try and diagnose it. Do a debugging process if you're working in software. Try and figure out what's going on. It could be your application, or it could be that your application is absolutely fine. And so if you absorb the belief that actually your applications are not fine when they are, that creates a very difficult loop to extricate yourself from. So by all means, get your application materials tested, get them reviewed by people you absolutely trust, and try and get a true sense of what might not be working with the knowledge that you might actually be doing everything right and still not getting interviews. And that's why that mental resilience and mental wellness really comes into it. Off the bat, those are my main things I would say about getting a job in 2025.
Excellent.
I'd add one point to clarify from what you said there, which was, you mentioned using AI.
Yes.
Specifically using it. Did you mean with regards to helping you apply, or could you just clarify what you meant by that?
Yeah, I think I meant it in the way of helping you put together cover letters and applications, even in terms of interview prep. So asking ChatGPT, in respect of a job description that you upload, what are the key things that I really need to be saying? How does that reflect based on what I've already produced? Or of course, you can get it to produce a cover letter. You can also have it assist in the job hunting process. If, for example, you want to get into hedge funds and you just don't know what hedge funds exist in London, you can use it as an information tool. and you can use it as a thinking partner as well. So there's loads of different ways in which it can be used and can really be helpful. But it can be a solution. It can also be a problem as well, just to tease that.
Could you elaborate on as a problem?
Yeah. So I saw a screenshot recently, and I know it's always difficult to describe something that we can't necessarily visually show, but essentially what it showed was a recruiter posting a cropped image of their Gmail inbox. And it was in response to a role that they'd put out. And you could just see the title of the applications as they came in. And a lot of the titles were absolutely identical. And you just knew that someone was using an AI bot to auto-generate applications. And that's one problem. The other problem is, I think when you're using AI to generate a cover letter, a CV, you can hit generate and you can read it and it sounds really good. And it is decent, like it's solid. It's using a reference source material that it trusts. The output is good. The problem is, if you're a recruiter and you're looking at 100 of these, you get to feel the ones that just sound like each other. And it's a very easy way to get yourself discarded, because as a recruiter, you're really looking for reasons to not give someone an interview. And I know that sounds brutal, but it's the truth. So if you're reading 100 cover letters and 80 of them have suspiciously similar structure, sentence structure, visually look the same, it's a very easy thing just to put those 80 to one side and look at the other 20. So it can be very seductive. They can look like a solution, or the use of AI can look like a solution, and it can be. But as long as you're kind of wary of problematic aspects and the ways in which it can trip you up without you realizing, that's a really important bit, but it is an amazing tool.
It makes me think of something Jack mentioned to me before when we were just experimenting with AI, just using it to write descriptions of things. We noticed that it would use the word tapestry all the time. And like, no matter what you asked it about. Yeah. So if you are a recruiter and then you're looking and then you notice these same keywords every time. But what I'm thinking then is that how are you meant to compete? It's quite difficult when maybe you're not able to craft like such a high level of formal English, but then someone's using ChatGPT and they're generating that. So how do you draw the line between using it as a tool to help you with your language, but not falling into the trap of just looking like a copy and paste tapestry of like all the other people using it?
I think it's a really good question. In some ways, you want to try and draft a rough outline of a cover letter as you would perceive it before you even go into it. So if English isn't your first language, that's fine. You can use whatever language you're comfortable with. And then when the output of ChatGPT or whatever you're using comes out, it's, again, very easy to be seduced, especially if English is not your first language and that's the application language you're making it in. But if you come back to your plan and your idea of what you wanted your cover letter roughly to say in your own words, you can look to integrate it that way. You don't have to change absolutely everything. But if you know that you, for example, want paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 to reflect the top 3 things from the job description each, then you know that you can change whatever ChatGPT's output is, or ask it follow-up prompts to refine it further. Like, can you give me one paragraph that just focuses on attention to detail or Excel? And then that's another way of integrating yourself into this process by really treating AI as a partner rather than just treating it as God, which is a very easy thing to do.
For sure. I think the trap that a lot of people fall into, I mean, while I was at the UN, some of our team were interviewing potential interns, and they said that the content that some of these people were coming out with, firstly, in their cover letters and applications, said it was excellent, a super high level of English, almost perfect. And then in the interviews, the people were almost pausing for a few seconds after each response and then almost reading or like almost as if they were being told what to say, especially when these were non-natives and were not that, like you could kind of feel the mismatch. So I feel like eventually, and this was a couple of years ago, so I'm sure now an interviewer is going to be able to pick up on those signs, even if you're taking a few seconds, and you can, I guess, identify if someone is not always, but reading and listening to those things. So
it's a bit of an arms race. There's a lot of software now that it can give you an answer almost in real time, and you can transparently look at the text you want to say, which is problematic for any number of reasons, because you don't really want to get caught out in, being in a job that isn't for you based on an interview that you've managed to kind of engineer your way past. I would also say there's one, I'm going to push back slightly if I may.
Sure.
Pauses before you start answering in an interview are absolutely crucial. And I think there's often a feeling that you've got to dive in to an answer to really show your degree of confidence and your degree of knowledge. I think that's really dangerous. I think I've interviewed a fair bit in my life, and I love people who take their time a little bit. I love people who just take a pause. I feel more respected somehow as an interviewer, because I feel like whatever they're going to come up with now, it's really been kind of well considered and seasoned. It's a little bit away from the point that you were making, but yeah, the point about interview preparation and application of AI in that field, I get the temptation. I'm not going to sit here and kind of criticize people, because I don't think that's fair. If you can, and if you're using these technologies, try and be self-reflective in their use. Ask yourself in terms of the output, read it and ask yourself what is working with it, and can I co-opt some of those techniques? Because you're going to have to take them forward into the interview, and you're going to have to take them forward into the job. Use them very, very thoughtfully, and you will get an immense amount of value. It's such beautiful accelerated learning using AI for interview prep and applications. There are benefits to be had without just being a static recipient of its output.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like we need to differentiate between quality of writing, quality of written English, and then quality of content.
Okay.
Is that what you're kind of getting at here? Maybe just to clarify.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. Yeah. I think I've been speaking more about content rather than language. So with the cover letter plan idea that I have, that's content, and you can do that in whatever language you're comfortable with. If you need ChatGPT to refine your language, yeah, by all means do that, but do it in a very active learning kind of way. Ask yourself why it's phrasing things in a certain way and what those words make you feel, so that at least you can take that learning forward. So yeah, I think I'm seeing those as slightly two different things.
Yeah, especially because you mentioned something to the effect of paragraph 1, 2, and 3 could be about these main points in the application. And that sounds like, because, I mean, I'm sure most people know how to use ChatGPT by now, but if they don't, you can reprompt it, right?
Yeah.
So you can give it something, it will give you an answer, and then you can kind of refine it and iterate. So maybe it's, I mean, for me anyway, personally, I like to use it in that sense, just to kind of, okay, maybe put more of that information in this paragraph. But then after, of course, the human touch is how you express, right? And I think maybe that is important to realize. Like, we don't write like robots. And there is, like you said, there is a way to know the difference. Some writing seems quite clinical. And other writing feels like it came from the heart, if there's no better way to say it. But.
So like a residue of realness in writing. I'd say do use read prompts very, very liberally to get exactly where you want. I think it's a really, really powerful point. Never take ChatGPT's first output, refine it, direct it. You can ask it to use more emotive or emotional language. You can ask it to be more convincing in terms of the tone of language, if that's one aspect that you really struggle with. I know often when we're talking about different languages, it can be hard to strike the right tone of formality as well. A lot of people, like sometimes I see cover letters with slang in, for example, and you really gotta, you've got to say what that really means. So use ChatGPT for those really kind of refined points. But yeah, read prompts, I think your point is very, very powerful. It's the best way of making it feel more like your own. And I think maybe you have more pride in what the output is as well. You've had more agency in being able to co-craft it, co-create that document.
And I think interviews is a huge area that maybe we can touch on in a bit. But before, just to build on some of the points you mentioned before, you said at the start, quality over quantity. In a short kind of summary, what actually makes a quality application in your eyes?
Yeah, really good question. So reverse engineering from the job description, it's going to sound crazy, but a job application is not about you. Okay, ostensibly what you populate it with is going to be about you, but if the job description says we want A, B, or C, whatever that is, problem-solving skills, attention to detail, Excel skills, it's your job to engineer those three things and make them hyper-prominent in an application, all the way down to even visually where you're putting words. So eye tracking software would suggest that if you're writing a paragraph in an application, the top left is going to be to have a real strong heat signature, and that will signify where most of the reader's time is being spent. And as you move diagonally away from that point through a paragraph, there's very low probability that anyone is reading it. So if the top thing in that job description is attention to detail, literally start a paragraph with attention to detail. You're putting exactly what the reader wants, where they're looking for it. And then you're just getting into sub-attributes and depth. So a lot of people will just leave it at that, but if you're talking about attention to detail, tell me about a sub-attribute of it. Tell me about a mechanical process where you've employed attention to detail. Also, the median average amount of time a CV spent is 3.9 seconds. And again, these points of immediacy put things really nice and clear where they're looking for it. As a recruiter, once you've either printed out all the applications, you're reading them on your screen, and you've probably got 100 of them to get through, and you have to find 4 people to interview. You really are just scanning for those keywords that are on the job description, and you're using those as an initial way to immediately get rid of three quarters of candidates. And it's a really easy cull. It can feel really complex as an idea to, how do I craft the perfect application? But honestly, I think it's really simple in many ways. Play the game. Mm-hmm. Give them those things that they're really looking for. You're automatically in the top 25%. Write it well and convincingly, you're automatically in the top 5%. Mm-hmm. What can really feel like a difficult process, especially if you're on LinkedIn and you see like, this job has already received 3,000 applications. You find, why should I even bother? I mean, I've got no, actually, you do just 2 basic principles, you're already in the top 5%. Mm. So yeah, the job description is the North Star. Never lose sight of it for applications. And then it's just a matter of understanding how people read. No one is going to read the whole thing. I think cover letters are read for fewer than 9 seconds. No one is looking to understand you as a person at the application stage. And I know that sounds quite brutal, but they're just trying to make a good decision so that they don't get in trouble with their boss. Their boss has told them to find 4 people to interview. They've got to find 4 applicants, which clearly state the things from the job description. So that if their job turns around to them as a recruiter and say, why have you brought this person forward for interview? That person needs to be accountable. They need to be able to pick up your application and say, we asked for thing 1, 2, 3. Here it is, things 1, 2, and 3 over and over again. Give them what they're looking for, is what I would say.
So we shouldn't be afraid of those softwares that they use to screen
ATS.
some. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. And my idea here is, if you imagine how someone's going to code a bit of software to read a CV or a cover letter or an application, those are coming from human principles, right? If someone was asking me, if a software developer was asking me, and I'm not a software guy, if they were asking me, Raj, how do I program this bit of software to check cover letters? I'm going to say, okay, well, spell checking, make sure it's not too long, make sure it's formatted fine. But crucially, the most important thing is plug those 3 things in from the job description that we're asking for. To what extent do they occur in this document? Where do they occur in this document? How many times in total are they mentioned? And so one easy thing to circumvent both for ATS, automated systems, and for human readers is, if you're talking in one paragraph about your problem-solving skills, just make sure you literally say problem-solving in at least 2 or 3 different places on that cover letter. But broadly speaking, don't be afraid of automated software. It's written by a human. If you're optimizing for a human, you are optimizing for ATS.
Sounds a little bit like a search engine optimization as well. Similar concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Just keep them convinced that you have that thing. Make their selection of you accountable to whom they're accountable to.
I really like the point you mentioned. It's excellent advice. And the whole thing about not getting too emotionally invested or personal sometimes, because, for example, let's stick on this software developer. If you're a seasoned software developer and you're applying to, no names mentioned, a top software firm, the chances are that as the software developer, you're going to know more about software than the initial recruitment team,
Yeah.
who's probably an extremely successful recruiter. But in that regard, it will most likely be some kind of checklist between both of them putting up these two documents and seeing, do they match? So your emotion and passion and, since I was a kid, I've been a passionate whatever. While that to you, you know that story, the recruiter most likely doesn't want to get told off by their boss for missing out that they don't have this particular software experience. So it is not as emotional or personal as a lot of people think. But I mean, that clichés is a big one that comes up. Since I was a kid, I've been passionate about this. Or what's your advice to people thinking of that kind of thing?
It breaks my heart when I see that. And I review a lot of cover letters and you've got to be very soft and sensitive, right? Because this is someone's writing. You've got to treat it with respect, and you don't know the journey that someone's been in. Like that one sentence about their journey from their childhood to get to where they are. Like, you don't know what they've been through. But I'm a cold man. I've got to tell them what is working and what is not. And just to be very clear about why that doesn't work in terms of its effectiveness for landing interviews, they've got no way of scoring it. So if you imagine the recruiter's got a mark scheme in their head, whether it's literal or not, it's essentially that job description, and each component on that job description, say, earns you 10 marks. You could be telling the most beautiful story about where you've come from, the struggles you've faced, what you've overcome, lovely perseverance, all magically valuable stuff. But the recruiter's got no way of parsing that information and attaching value to it contextually. That person is just looking at their mark scheme. They're just looking to mark you on these three things. And you give them those three things. And so when I say like CV, a cover letter is not about you, and it speaks directly to your point, but it's not personal. It's really not personal. They're not trying to understand you or your journey. Not at this stage of the recruitment cycle, where for that software developer role, you're speaking to a recruiter. You can keep a little bit more of that depth and those stories for interview. I feel where more of that humanity can come out. So I think in many respects for job hunting, it's finding the right tool for the right stage of the recruitment process and really trying to understand who your reader is, which I think you articulated really well there.
The flip side of what you said before, you were saying that when people start with these kind of emotional stories, it's not really the way to go. And I was thinking of a really busy recruiter, basically, who's just wants something direct. Is there such thing as being too direct?
I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say, let's imagine the life of that busy recruiter. Let's say they've got into work, it's 8:30, their car didn't start, they're already late. They've just opened their inbox. You've got 120 unread emails in there. The babysitter suddenly called in sick, and your boss walks over to your desk and hands you 200 pieces of paper, which were not already on your to-do list. And your boss is saying, okay, let's say it's me, Raj. I want to know who to interview from this list, from this group of people. I just want 4 people. I'm going to be in my office over there. I want you to let me know by 10 at the latest, but 9:30 if possible would be absolutely amazing, but definitely no later than 10. And you kind of barely sat down and you're faced with this gargantuan amount of information. There's such an amazing amount of information there. You want to do it as quickly as possible. You're not incentivized to find the best person. This is the freaky thing to keep in mind. As that person, you are incentivized to do 2 things. Number 1, to do it on time. Number 2, to not get in trouble with your boss. That is it. Those are all of the conditions you have to fulfill. And so to not get in trouble with your boss, you've got to come up with reasonable decisions that you can account for and do it in time. And so you are literally almost like an algorithm. You're just scanning for those things on the job description. And if it's not immediately obvious to you when you look at these pieces of paper, you're kind of thrilled, honestly, because that is a CV you can put to the side. So I mentioned, and I'm going to take the example with CVs forward. So I mentioned the average was 3.9 seconds. That's the median average. The mean average is 5.1. It means that there's a bunch of CVs that are getting like 0.1, 0.2 of a second on them. And so as a recruiter, you are robotic and you are clinical. You're not entering into an emotional state. You want to get this job done and get back to your 120 unread emails. So I don't think you can be too robotic at this stage. I think it's actually more effective just to press on the things that they really want to read. It's going to be the best way you get return on investment for the amount of time you put in.
I think it's an excellent point about just putting yourself in the shoes of, for the first step, the recruiter, and then in the interview stage, as the interviewer, you will, again, not making the application about you, but thinking from their perspective is a far more effective in the long-term strategy for sure.
Yeah, they've got a square block of a role to fill. They want to understand if you are a square block. That is it. They're not looking to understand you as a human being. They're not looking to understand your humanity. Honestly, they don't really care about your story. It's not helping them fill that square block. And I know that sounds dehumanizing, and in many ways it is. But the point is, from an application, you don't know who's going to be effective. You simply don't know. You don't write a CV to get a job. You write a CV to get an interview. And that's a crucial distinction. Your humanity comes out at interview when they are in a different psychological and emotional state. They're really looking to understand you and whether you're going to fit in the team and whether you're going to be motivated by this specific work. At that initial stage, at the recruitment stage, it's just a case of, do you have the right key for the right lock? It's unemotional, it's scientific, play the game.
Yeah, I mean, I've come across in the 6 years now that I've been also working in careers consultancy of people saying, should I use humor or should I use, like, I've quite emotional stories about family reasons why they haven't got as much experience or this and that. And again, it's kind of like being cold enough to break it to some people that there is a chance and it's a risk that someone may read that and laugh and be very impressed, or that particular story resonates with them, but it's a big risk. So my advice would be stay away. But yeah, I guess would you be of the same opinion there? Of, like, some people say, oh, what about a bit of humor in my application? Or what about the reason why I don't have as much experience as someone else is because of X difficult issue that someone went through. I mean, it's tough to break it, but
I think everyone wants their application materials to stand out. You want your CV to stand out. You want your cover letter to stand out. And I think the crucial thing is, what do we mean by stand out? Because I think some people can think, if I use humor, well, that's going to stand out because most people aren't using humor. And I'm like, well, yeah, it will stand out, but will it help that particular type of standing out? If the other way of thinking about it is, if you're used to reading 100 cover letters at a time, also as a recruiter, you develop a mental model in your head about roughly what you expect to be there and what you expect it to be saying. So I think if you get something with a bit of humor, it throws you. You're still only going to get an average of 9 seconds. Do you want to use one of those seconds of that person just kind of negotiating and locating themselves around a joke to get back to the thing of, okay, I need to find out if this person actually has the skills to do the role. So please don't take it personally, is what I would say. Your story is incredibly important. The richness of it is incredibly important. But if our objective is to maximize the probability of you getting to an interview, I'd say you stand out most. You leap past 75% of the field just by speaking to the job description. That is the best way of standing out.
Awesome. Thanks. Very clear. Very useful. Another point that you mentioned before was about reaching out directly to employers. What would you advise is the best way to do that? How do I write to someone, whether it's an email or a LinkedIn DM?
Okay.
What advice would you give to someone? Okay, I'm going to reach out to this person. Hi, Mr., Miss, whoever. How formal should you be? What should we do to get the best outcome in that situation?
Great question. I am a big fan of sliding into their DMs, but in a very specific way. So let's say it's on LinkedIn, you find their profile, you're reading through what they're doing, you really dig what they're doing, you like it, and you want to make a connection with this person. I would say hit the connect request if they say yes. And you've got like a 40-50% chance of any random person saying yes to a LinkedIn request. You then follow up with a very short message consisting of 3 components. Number 1, dear Jessica, really love the sound of the work you're doing in NGO organizations, particularly looking at expanding education in East Africa for whatever. And you're getting that from their profile. That's one thing. The second thing you're saying, second sentence, is you're making a parallel to yourself. So you're saying something like, there's a parallel with my own experience because I've also gained exposure to the efficacy of educational programs in Eastern Africa, particularly, I appreciate the way you're employing technique X and Y, and I can see the effect it's having. Element 3, might we be able to have a short conversation, perhaps 10 minutes over Zoom, about how I can get professional exposure to the work you're doing, or even to the terrific work you're doing. Kind regards, Hakeem, send. And let's break that down, right? So 3 components, really 3 sentences. First one was making that person feel seen and appreciated and valued. Hi, Jessica, really appreciate the work, really interested in the work you're doing in X. And if you imagine being on the receiving end of this message from a complete random individual who you have no idea about, your first movement has to be towards them rather than about you saying about, how amazing your exposure to educational policy is. Make it about them. In terms of their perspective, that's then brought you their attention to get to the second sentence, which from your point of view as a writer would be to deliver contextual value. There's a parallel with my own experience because I'm doing thing Y, where the 2 things in those sentences should correlate a little bit. Third sentence is the call to action in terms of marketing speak. Might we be able to have a 10-minute chat over Zoom about how I can get professional exposure to the work you're doing? You're being kind of deliberately vague with professional experience because the more specific you are in your ask, if you ask for a job or an internship or work experience, you're giving them something tangible to say no to. You're presenting them with an opportunity. Don't give them that. If you're vague, if you're tactically vague, it's a benefit because they're going to attach their own subjective meaning to that phraseology. So if they're like, I've got no time to support an intern over the summer, but I might be able to, I'm trying to get this big document proofread, maybe this person could help out in this way. And in the initial part of that third call to action bit, 10-minute chat over Zoom, you want to be time defined. So you want to give person clarity as to what the time ask is. Now you asked about formality and informality. I think be relatively informal. Okay. You're not using slang, but you're not writing massive paragraphs. You're not saying dear sir, madam, or kind regards. This is a random message from a random person, and you're appealing to their humanity. You're appealing to their desire to be helpful. Most people want to be helpful, and this is what a lot of people forget when sending out these messages. If they don't want to be helpful, that's absolutely fine. They just won't respond. And so there's a huge amount of selective bias in terms of who does respond. They're normally going to be more helpful anyway. I love this technique. I think I first used it when I was 18 to get my first job as a cashier at a retail bank. I think ever since I've just seen the power of it. And being on the other side of the desk at times, being a recruiter, if you can help that recruiter short circuit the machinery of recruitment, you're doing them a massive favor because otherwise, posting a job takes so much effort. You've got to get approval for budget. You've got to get approval for the specific type of marketing. But anyway, we're getting away from the point. 3-part message, make it really short and succinct, make them feel seen and heard, and be a little bit tactically vague with the call to action at the end. Make it as easy as possible for them to hit reply and say, yeah, sure, let's chat.
I really like the time thing you said as well, because most people may not have the time to take on an intern for a year, paid intern into their organization. But 10 minutes. If we've got 10 minutes to play Candy Crush on our phones or whatever the game is, most of the time people, if approached in the right way, can give just 10 minutes, which most of the time it will actually go on longer than 10 minutes if you're having a flowing conversation, right? So I'm interested to hear your opinion. I speak to people who often try and find a point of commonality in terms of university. So when I know the LSE alumni network is huge, but when working with people in the UN from all over the world, basically, I say if you can find someone who maybe went to the same university as you, or also if they're from the same cultural background. So you may find someone who they speak the same language as you or they went to the same university as you. Hi, just noticed we both graduated from whatever university. Oh, I'm also from here. It's really great to see people from here doing this. What do you think of getting those little points of commonality in as well?
That's absolutely brilliant. So I would say if you don't lean on the network you have, let's say it's a university network, you've both been to the same university. If that's not the case, you've got like a 1 in 5, 1 in 4 chance of them replying to the kind of message that I described. I think if they have been in the same networks, if they've been at the same university or the same organization, I think that goes down to about 1 in 3. So there's a big tangible the proof is in the numbers. It's a massive impact. The points of commonality that you have, if you can express them, it can only be a good thing.
And another thing you mentioned as well was about like ghosting. Why does that happen? Why do employers basically leave you on red? And how do you deal with that? What's your advice to someone who's put their heart into 100 applications over the last few months, heard back from like 2? Why does that occur? And what's your advice to kind of keep motivated during that?
I wish it didn't happen. I want to be clear about that before I say anything else. I think it takes an enormous amount of even just overcoming the first hurdle of self-belief in order to submit an application. Like, it takes quite a lot to make it. I think ghosting happens for a few reasons. I think the biggest reason in my mind is cost savings by organizations. Organizations don't want to spend money. They don't like spending money. They want to make things as lean as possible and to make things as efficient. It takes time for a recruiter to send an email out that's personalized. It takes time to set up their HR software to auto-generate an email for the people who they've chosen not to take forward. Each and every single action is an extra step on their to-do list, and people don't tend to overstaff HR or recruitment roles because, I guess from their point of view, they're not revenue generative if it's a business. So I think recruiters are being asked to do more and more with less and less. And I don't think recruiters want to be ghosting you. I don't think they definitely don't get any happiness from it. Most people don't go into recruitment to make people feel bad. It is just a product of the system. And I think the crucial thing is not to take it personally and not to learn the wrong lessons from being ghosted. Because I think when you're rejected and you haven't heard anything in terms of being ghosted, I think what generally tends to happen is you attach that lack of response to any insecurity you have in yourself. And it's probably nothing to do with that thing, but you will find a way of attaching it to yourself. And I think that's the thing that really needs to be guarded against. It's really not personal in any way, generally just a cost and time saving measure. And it is unfortunate.
Raj, thank you so much for all of your time and energy today. And to the viewers out there, we thank you also for your viewership. If you like this conversation, give us a like and subscribe. Comment down below if you have any questions for Raj. And I suppose as one final question, do you have anything else to say?
I think one very brief point. I love learning new skills, and I think learning has come up as a theme thus far. If you can do open online courses on MITx, on edX, as a way of expanding your skill set, it's one thing that generally led to a huge amount of confidence increases in terms of what I could do. So maybe that's the last thing that I would say.
Fantastic.
I've been subscribed to Raj's content all the way from the UCL days and taken so much value from that content. For anyone who wants to apply to universities or improve their employability, make sure you check out Raj's socials. Of course, links down below.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.